Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this wonderful Monday afternoon. And we've got a couple of things that we're going to talk about. They're focused on Olympic basketball because all of the matchups recently happened, like in all of the groups. So in the first segment, I'm going to focus on the United States basketball and how they were playing. They played against Serbia. And I'm just going to go ahead and just, give an analysis of that game, this, that, and the other, give you all the information, all the big highlights, all the stories, all the stuff that happened. And then in the second segment, I'm going to briefly talk about all of the rest of the games that ended up happening, like the scores for the rest of the games, the best players on each of the teams for the rest of the game, as well as, just highlights and things that I remember watching. Now, I was unable to watch the entire game and all of the games because they're all at very, very different times. For example, on Tuesday, right? There's going to be a game at 5, and there's going to be a game at 7:30, then there's going to be a game at 11:15, and there's even a game at, since we're using European time, at 15 o'clock, which is 3 p.m., I believe, in American Standard Time, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that's essentially how the games are going to go. There's a game at 5 o'clock in the morning. There's no way that I'm going to be able to watch that, but I'm going to try because there's these games are very competitive. But aside from that, then in the third segment, I'm going to talk about why Jayson Tatum didn't see the court at all in this game, and why Haliburton also didn't see the court at all in this game, because they literally counted 0 minutes. Everyone was able to play in that game aside from those two, and I'm just going to talk about my opinions on that. And then in the fourth segment, I'm going to talk about why the French were booing Joel Embiid, because a lot of people were confused as to why that was happening. So I'm just going to go ahead and explain why. We also have a special fifth segment that I like to reveal at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead, use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. It is GSMCpodcast.net. Really ups the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. And without further ado, let's go right ahead and Let's go right ahead and go into the first segment, which is going to be all about Team USA basketball and just, their dominance as a team. So they ended up playing Serbia, and as you can guess, they ended up beating as you could see, they ended up beating Serbia 110-84. This was such an easy game for the United States, in large part because Kevin Durant was cleared to play in this game. That is right. The United States is no longer suffering from crippling injuries. We now have a completely loaded roster full of talent, and they absolutely did not disappoint. They were a completely different unit out there. And again, in large part of that was due to Kevin Durant. Now, again, the United States, their production against, especially when they go up against Serbia, they really, they wipe the floor with that team. And, unlike the first game that they played, the exhibition game where they played, where, the game was really close until the very end, it was in favor of Serbia, early. But then afterwards, Kevin Durant started scoring, and it was, there was no turning back for the United States. I mean, and what's crazy is that he probably wasn't even, the best player on the team. LeBron was arguably the best player on the team. He ended up, putting up much more complete stats. And these two became the first duo each to have 20 points in an opening game in Olympics in USA basketball history. So LeBron James, he ended with 21 points, 9 rebounds, and 7 assists. Actually, wait, no, I messed that up. It should be the other way around. That's my bad. He ended up getting 9 assists along with 7 rebounds. I completely screwed up those two numbers. I apologize for that. And then Kevin Durant ended up getting 23 points and 2 rebounds. And one of the biggest highlights about Kevin Durant in this game was that he only missed 1 shot. Same thing with LeBron. LeBron and Kevin Durant, they barely missed. Now, I'm not going to say that LeBron didn't actually miss 1 shot, but towards the halftime, right, like at the half, they were completely flawless. Like, they did not miss a single shot in the entire first half. And, Kevin Durant later in the game ended up missing 1 shot, but, it's just 1 shot. And one of the crazier things about this is that Kevin Durant ended up playing, like, the least amount of minutes amongst a majority of the starting lineup. Not everyone in the starting lineup. He played more minutes than Joel Embiid, who still ends up being the only person on Team USA that plays but doesn't really get to play for much. Like, he starts, but he only played 11 minutes in this game. And, it's certainly better than Haliburton and Jayson Tatum, who didn't play any minutes. I'm going to talk about that in a different segment because that's kind of ridiculous. But when you have Kevin Durant in the lineup scoring 23 points in 16 minutes, like, just imagine what he can do in an entire, like, playing LeBron level minutes. Because LeBron, he's the oldest player on this basketball court, and he's playing the most amount of minutes on this basketball court with 26. Like, that is almost unheard of. Like, imagine Wizards Jordan doing something like this while putting up these numbers. And honestly, the fact that I just got the stats wrong is completely bothering me. So I'm going to fix it right now because I'm very, very upset that I mixed up both of the stats. It's very, very unacceptable. I will say that. But I mean, LeBron and his ridiculous stat line. We've grown to expect it, especially in his NBA career and in all of the games. But in the Olympics, it's a little bit different because you have to spread the ball and you got to share the ball amongst the rest of your teammates. And constantly doing that isn't it's going to negate your usage rate. And obviously, if your usage rate gets a little bit negated, you're not really going to be scoring that much. Like, for example, we know that Steph Curry, he can go off at any given night, but he didn't really go off in this game. He ended up getting 11 points. But when you're on a team like this that's as loaded as this, you don't really need to do all that much scoring, right? And Anthony Edwards, who, arguably was the number one option until LeBron did LeBron things, he only ended up getting 11 points, but he is consistent. Like, he is consistently getting 11 points in every single game, which is, like, ideally what you want on, for these players on Team USA. Like, that's ideally the kind of performance that you want. If everyone on Team USA just scores 11 points, everyone else will be fine. Because they all have the ability to easily score 11 points. Like, every single one of them, maybe aside from, Derek White and Drew Holiday, and whose roles on the team are, mainly on the defense as opposed to scoring. Yet, despite that, Drew Holiday ended up getting 15 points in this game. Majority of these players are going to be able to score the ball and at least get 11 points rather efficiently. Again, Joel Embiid did not play well in this game at all. He only ended the game with 4 points. He ended literally just 4 points and 2 rebounds and 0 assists. Like, I'm not even joking. He is unbearably lazy to watch. It is just the way that he plays. And, we are so lucky that Kevin Durant was in this game, because, if it weren't for Kevin Durant, then this game wouldn't be a blowout and everyone would be really, really upset at the results and how the game was close. And really, this should be the kind of performance that Joel Embiid is having, especially against someone like Jokic. But no, he just needs to completely get outplayed by Jokic yet again. Speaking of which, I should talk about, the Serbian team. Jokic, he ended the game with 20 points and 5 rebounds, and 8 assists. Now, I don't really have him on, on this list here, unfortunately, but that's just because he lost. And that's the only reason why I'm not having him on this, on these player displays, because a majority of these player displays, they're only reserved for players who played phenomenal on the on the losing team, or the best player on the team that ended up winning. And there wasn't really enough space for me to add Jokic to that. Now, one of the very interesting stats about Jokic and this game is that the Serbian team, like I mentioned how in the exhibition game, the Serbian team they were playing very well, right? Like I'm sure if you've watched the previous podcast, you remember how I said that they were playing extremely talented, like they were very talented and they were playing some of the best basketball that they've played, that they could play against the United States. I'm sure I said that on a previous podcast when they matched up against each other in the exhibition match. And because the game was close. But I underestimated, the immense value that Jokic brings to the Serbian team. Like, he is literally the only player on that team. And let me explain that. So, when Jokic was on the court, the Serbian team scored 81 points. This was when the entire team of Serbia, they were on the court with Jokic. They scored 81 points. And Team USA, in contrary, with Jokic on the court, also scored 81 points. So the game would be tied. Jokic on the floor, they score 81, then the other team scores 81. However, when Jokic goes off the floor, the scoring difference is ridiculous. Serbia only scored 3 points with Jokic off of the court. And the United States scored 29 when Jokic was off the court. If that doesn't scream value, I don't know what does. Sorry, I was trying to sneeze, but I stopped myself for a second. Excuse me for that. But again, Jokic on the court, 81 points. Jokic off the court, 3 points. That is a huge margin, and if that's really going to be, the story of the entire Serbian run, I think this is where the run ends, because there's just no way a team is going to be able to find any kind of success against the rest of these players, with all of these players, especially with the recent matchups in the other. Well, not in the other group because they're in the same group, but in the other game with South Sudan and Puerto Rico. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about that in the second segment, as well as the rest of the other basketball games that ended up happening in this second segment. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned. That is it for the first segment. I'll see you in the second segment.
Feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back in the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, I'm going to go ahead and recap the Olympic Games, the scores, some of the best players that played on the court, and, just my opinions on some of the games that I did watch. I didn't watch all of them, but I watched, some of them. So before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead, use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. It is GSMCpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. And without further ado, let's go right ahead and go into this second segment, which is talking about the rest of the scores. But actually, before I do want to point out this, because there was something that I watched and I completely forgot to mention in the previous segment. But I watched during the second quarter of the USA versus Serbia game, there was a substitution change, and LeBron went over to the ref and was saying that substitution change was not allowed. Like, he literally knew the FIBA rules better than the ref knew the FIBA rules, which is, it's a little bit of a flex, I understand, but that was just something that I thought was really interesting, because it's like, we always talk about, LeBron and his IQ, but like, that's just his IQ on full display right there. And it's like, you can't get any better than that now. So, but besides that, let's go ahead and go into the rest of the segments. So, I should remind everyone, like, how this Olympic tournament works, right? So, obviously, we have the Serbian team and the USA team. They played against each other. But if you watch hockey or if you watch soccer, then you're going to understand exactly how this placement works. So each team is placed in a group. There's 12 teams altogether, broken up into 3 groups of 4. And so you have Group A, Group B, and Group C. So the way that the standings are worked, and the way that the standings work, is that you get placed based off of, like, your record. So if you're 1-0, you're going to be in the top. If you're 0-2, you're going to be in the bottom, things like that. But if there is a tiebreaker, right? If, like, let's say 2 teams have the same record, then the tiebreaker is the point differential. So basically just how many points they either win or lose by. So, like, let's say for example, the South Sudan, that game ended like this. South Sudan ended up scoring 90 points. Puerto Rico ended up scoring 79, right? So that would mean that in the standings, so, like, after in the standings, how it would work is that South Sudan, they would be 1-0, and their point differential would be plus 11. And, that number at the end is going to change over time. So if they win the next game, then their number would be, like, let's say they win the next game by 2. Then their point differential would be plus 13. If they were to lose the game by 2, then their point differential would be plus 9. Right? That's how the seedings, and that's how it would work. And so for the standings right now, as they stand, actually, you know what? I'll go over the standings after I go over the scores. So, South Sudan, they ended up beating Puerto Rico 90-79. Arguably, like, this is also South Sudan's first ever Olympic victory in the history of their country and their organization, by the way, for basketball. So, that's one game. Next was Canada and Greece. They ended up playing, and Canada ended up scoring 86 points compared to Greece's 79. Then in the next game, France ended up playing Brazil, and France ended up scoring 78 points, and Brazil ended up scoring 66 points. Then in the other game, Germany ended up playing Japan. Germany ended up winning 97-77. And finally, Australia ended up playing Spain, and Australia ended up winning 92-80. So with all of those games in mind, and with all of those, scoring and point differentials in mind, the way that the standings are looking at right now is that the standings for Group A are number 1, Australia, which has a 1-0 record and a point differential of 12. Number 2, Canada, which has a point differential of 7, and is 1-0 as well. And then underneath, the teams that are missing the cutoff are Greece and Spain. Greece has a -7 point differential, and Spain has a -12 point differential. Then in Group B, the the number 1 seed is Germany, because they ended up beating Japan by 20 points, right? If you guys remembered that, because I did bring it up. There it is. And then in France, they're ranked 2nd because they won, and they beat the Brazilian team by 12. So, naturally that would mean Japan is at the bottom of this Group B standing, and the top 2 teams are France and Germany. Makes total sense. And then in the Group C stages, obviously the United States is number 1 because they had the best point differential amongst the winners, right? They ended up, scoring, and winning by 26 points, And, South Sudan, they ended up winning by 11 points, so they're right up there with the United States, which is a little bit surprising because, again, we would have expected, Serbia to end up being in the 2nd seed, but, you can't win them all, obviously, and that's how the seeding goes. Now, there are a couple of players that ended up, that I feel like should be recognized for their, fantastic performance and just how well that they played overall and as a team. So Franz Wagner, he ended up being, he was ridiculous from the for Germany on the court. Ended up getting 22 points and 6 rebounds and 1 assist. And he wasn't the only player on Germany that I feel deserves this kind of attention. Daniel Theis, he also played phenomenal for the German team. He ended up scoring 18 points and did not miss a single shot in this game. 7 for 7 from the field, 5 for 5 from 3. And he was also able to record 7 rebounds as well. So, just fantastic performance overall. Well, for Japan, Rui Hachimura, he played pretty well, but since he was on the losing team, I did not feel it was really important to put, his stats up here because, again, being on the losing team, you're going to get points taken off of that if you're on the losing team. That's just how it works. So, next is, well, again, unless you play phenomenally like the next player on this list, but Carlik Jones for South Sudan ended up playing phenomenally for this team, and he ended up scoring 19 points and ended up getting 7 rebounds and 6 assists as well. Just a phenomenal athlete and one of the very few players in the history of the Olympics to get a triple-double in a game. And for the losing side, again, I mentioned that I wasn't going to display the stats for any player on the losing side, but Jose Alvarado played really well and almost too well to not be considered as, a player on this list, right? Like, he's definitely a Puerto Rican's player of the game, ended up scoring 26 points and got 2 rebounds and 5 assists. And, he shot 3 for 8 from the 3, that's my bad. But again, this was a fantastic performance coming in from someone who was on the losing side. Now, next on this list is Victor Wembanyama. Ended up doing Victor Wembanyama things as always. 19 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 steals. He's just a different beast, and he's arguably going to be the best player in the history of basketball when it's all said and done. He does have the potential to be that and do that, and he also has the potential as being remembered as one of the best defenders in the history of basketball, period. Being 7'4" and being able to guard players on the perimeter and get steals as well as he does, it's not something to scoff at. He's fantastic like that. Next on this list is Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, he ended up losing in this game against Canada, 79-86, but his performance was just way too good to not be considered. 34 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. He was the Greek freak, as they like to call him. And, he's just ridiculous because it's like 34 points in an Olympic game. It's not something that's easy to come by. And he went 11 for 17 from the field, which is 64%, meaning that like he dropped 34 points on 64% shooting, which is ridiculous. And Canada, they had some pretty good players, but RJ Barrett really was the one who stood out for me. He ended up getting 23 points, was 8 for 13 from the field. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 21 points. He was the second leading scorer for this team, but I mean, RJ Barrett playing as well as he did was really like, it was a surprise to me, and I had to include him on this list, and I really had to put him over Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And finally, the last player on this list of, performances that I have, and in my opinion, deserve the attention, is Santi Aldama. Now, he is the only player who I think, he is the only player that's, well, not really the only player that's on the losing team, but he's the only player from this game that I mentioned that was on the losing team and I thought was the best player. While I will say that, if that makes any sense to any of you guys, because in this game with Australia, I don't have any other player from the Australian team because I quite frankly don't think anyone from the Australian team played as well and as great as Santi Aldama did, despite the fact that they were able to win the game. So, I mean, Santi ended up getting 27 points in this game on 6 for 8 shooting from the 3-point line. And really, that was just the phenomenal scoring from him and the great shooting that he has. He was also 9 for 10 from the free throw line as well. And those were really obviously aside from the 5 rebounds, those 27 points on the 6 for 8 shooting was really what stood out to me, because when I was looking at that game and I was watching that game, I was like, this dude is just, he is trigger happy. He knows how to shoot the rock like it is nobody's business. And he's also going to play a little bit later, I believe he's going to play on Tuesday in the morning at 5 o'clock. I believe that's what the schedule is telling me. But I'll go ahead and, figure that out a little bit later. Next, we have to go ahead and go into the third segment and talk about Jayson Tatum and, my opinions on why Jayson Tatum wasn't playing in this game, as well as why, Tyrese Haliburton also wasn't playing in this game. Just going to get into that and explain a couple of things, or at least, give my opinions on why this had to be done. And I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, I'm going to be talking about Team USA and their minutes, and just, how underutilized some of these players on the team really are, as well as, my opinions on Steve Kerr and his coaching methods and things like that, especially in this game, because this was arguably one of the most trending topics in all of basketball and throughout the rest of the Olympics, aside from, the actual games and the scoring. So, basically, Jayson Tatum in this matchup. Now, the Steve Kerr, he said several times that really, and and also Haliburton, I forgot to mention. But Steve Kerr has mentioned several times that the United States is going to play based off of, like, matchups. So, depending on who and what team they play with and they play against is going to depend on the lineup that they bring out. So, it's like, they are going to bring out a different lineup going up against Serbia. They would bring out a different lineup going against Spain. They would bring out a different lineup going up against Germany. Things like that. Like, in almost every single exhibition game that they played, there was the only definite starters were LeBron, Steph, and Joel Embiid. And the only players that, and like, you know, every single time, you know, the matchups, they would sort of change. So, like, the players, they would play a certain amount of minutes, and, you know, it would change every single game. So it would be like, aside from LeBron would play in almost every single minute, every single time. And same thing with Steph. But, you know, as the games changed, Joel Embiid saw less time on the court. As the games changed, Jrue Holiday sometimes would see less time on the court. Derek White would also see some more or less time on the court, depending on the matchups. So there's never a guaranteed rotation or a way to fill in this lineup. And that's the biggest problem that I have with Steve Kerr. Just the fact, like, I have no problem with, you know, working off of, like, you know, making your starting lineup so that way it best suits the situation that you're in and it better suits your matchups. But the minutes and, like, just how long players can play, especially someone like Jayson Tatum, Tyrese Haliburton, maybe not, but someone like Jayson Tatum, I feel like, you know, deserves these minutes on the court. Like, again, I totally understand Haliburton not playing because they have a lot of point guards and they have a lot of guards that just are arguably better. But Jayson Tatum, I don't really see that same thing. Like, aside from Kevin Durant and LeBron, there's really no other player at his position that plays like him. And again, those are like the only two small forwards that are better than him, and the only two small forwards that are even on the team, LeBron and Kevin Durant. So with that in mind, I don't think there should be any reason that Jayson Tatum shouldn't be playing in any of these games. I mean, like, his value that he brings, not just on the offensive side, but also on the defensive side, is something that's really, really valuable. Now, again, I understand that this was, you know, Kevin Durant's homecoming game, and, you know, he needed to get a lot of minutes in this game to sort of, like, you know, loosen up. But he only played 16. Like, of all the starters, the only starter that didn't get more minutes than him was Embiid. And Embiid never gets more minutes than anyone else on Team USA. Like, it's really, like, amazing to me that Jayson Tatum was unable to see the court. Meanwhile, you have his two teammates, Jrue Holiday and Derek White, who have seen the court way more than him in this specific game than, like, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, because Jayson Tatum is arguably the best player on his team, and here he has Jrue Holiday and Derek White playing more minutes than him. So it's one of two things that I think is going on here. So, one, Steve Kerr's rotations are terrible, or two, Steve Kerr is trying to become, like, you know, the ultimate head coach mastermind and just completely meddle with the entire Boston Celtics and their core players. Because, like, think of it this way. Now, he gets Jayson Tatum and Jrue Holiday on the roster. Then, when a roster spot opens up, he chooses Derek White as opposed to Jaylen Brown, therefore causing tension between Jaylen Brown and the rest of the starters. Because, you know, Jaylen Brown, he won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP and the Finals MVP and wasn't selected over Derek White. And that's arguably, that's going to sting him. Like, that would sting anyone that wins an award and doesn't get recognized for it by making the Olympics. Like, that would sting anyone. And then, on top of that, in this game with Jayson Tatum, he forces Jayson Tatum to not play a single minute of this game, meanwhile lets his teammates, Jrue Holiday and Derek White, get all the minutes. So this could be just like, a big brain move from Steve Kerr to try and, mess with the rest of the Boston Celtics and cause a trouble in paradise so that way the Celtics can't win another championship and go back to back, or that they would want to split up and do whatever it is that they want to do. That could be, that's just a possibility. I'm not saying that that's what I think. That could be a possibility in what Steve Kerr is doing. But, I mean, I've seen Steve Kerr and his rotations are very, very questionable, especially with his time on Golden State. He has some very, very questionable rotations. And I understand that trying to balance playing time between Kevin Durant, Jayson Tatum, and all of the other starters is going to be a bit of a problem, but it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be a problem. It should be that you should be able to put any of these players with each other, and they can play with each other just fine. Like, I don't see a single reason why Jayson Tatum cannot be in that bench unit and then here and there just get subbed out with LeBron and here and there get subbed out by KD and the other way around. I don't see why they have to. I don't understand why he's so guard heavy. Like, he plays every single guard aside from Tyrese Haliburton, and mainly because the rest of those guards, they like playing the perimeter defense. But no, like, Devin Booker, yes, he should get minutes, but he shouldn't play at the same time when two other guards are playing. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that at all. Like, I understand it's a very positionless basketball, but like, you gotta play based off of the way I see it. You should play based off of defensive liability and height. Like, if you have some ridiculous offense, you need to have some other players on the defense to compensate for your high offense. It can't just be offense on the court. And I understand part of the reason why that the rest of the players are playing, like, for example, why Drew Holiday and Derek White are playing, are mainly because of their defense. I don't understand why Jayson Tatum cannot play. Now, I understand why you wouldn't want Haliburton playing, because, again, it's like you're choosing between a player that is passing, that loves to pass first, against another player that, like, so I'm comparing Derek White and Tyrese. You have a player that really likes to pass the ball, but you got a player that likes to play defense as well as pass the ball. Like, I feel like you're going to pick the player that plays defense, especially when you have a team that's loaded with offensive talent. Now, Erica Johnson's in the chat. What's up? Yep, nothing much. Just, talking about the Olympics and how Tatum is just not seeing the court. Steve Kerr, he recently said that he was actually, Jayson Tatum was going to play in the next game, but who is going to sit out if Jayson Tatum is going to play? I don't agree with that at all. I feel like every single one of the players should be able to play at not at the same time, but they should be able to play in the same game. And you should already have a rotation set up for these kinds of players. Like, that should already be something that you have set up. I understand you had to wait for Kevin Durant to be fully healthy, but still, you should have had theories and things like that already set up and ready for this, for these kinds of Olympic games. Like, it's just unacceptable that you don't, in my opinion. So that's all that I have really on Tatum and Haliburton getting benched. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go into the fourth segment where I talk about why Joel Embiid was getting booed by the French national, well, not really the French national team, but by the French people in the stands and in the stadium, because a lot of people were really surprised that he was getting booed. Like, they don't understand why he was getting booed. So I'm just going to go ahead and explain that for all of you guys that don't know why he was getting booed. Like, a lot of people thought that he was getting booed because, like, of the fact that he's just not been playing that well in the United States. But it's a little bit more than that, and some people just, they didn't really understand that it was more than that. So I'm going to talk about it after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, I'm just going to explain why Joel Embiid was getting booed by the French. And it was so bad that this actually was brought up in headlines. Joel Embiid booed by the French spectators. That was the headline. They literally made a headline for Joel Embiid getting booed. It doesn't sound like it's a big deal, right? When you just think about it, because it's okay, they're just rooting against the United States because they're the biggest threat. No, it was mainly Joel Embiid because it would make sense for the French to boo against all of the other basketball teams that are playing in these Olympic Games, because the French and the French national team, they have the most ridiculous home field advantage throughout the entirety of the Olympics. Everyone in France knows Victor Wembanyama, everyone in France knows the French national team, and everyone is super excited to, represent, to feel represented in the Olympics. So they're going to try their best to feel represented in the stands as well. That's just something that you're going to see in every single time that a country hosts and their country is playing in the whatever kind of competition the country is playing in. So for basketball in particular, there's going to be a lot of French fans in the stands, and they're all going to either support Victor Wembanyama or they're all going to boo Joel Embiid. So I'm going to go ahead and basically explain why Joel Embiid was getting booed by so many of the French fans, aside from the fact that he was playing some of the worst basketball of his life right now, which is not an exaggeration. He's playing horribly now, honestly. It's really people are wondering, why do the French not like Joel? Why is he getting booed so bad? So Joel Embiid's, it was really down to Joel Embiid choosing his United States jersey and his United States citizenship over his French citizenship. Yeah. He's from Cameroon, so he has his French citizenship, and therefore the fact that he's not playing with France is just seen as, it's seen as relatively weak. You could think of it as how would I put this in NBA terms? I mean, yeah, sure, why not? You could think of it like Kevin Durant leaving the Thunder and going to play with Golden State. You could think of it that way. Because, or you can even think of it like LeBron leaving Cleveland and going over to Miami and playing with the Miami Heat. I feel like that might be a better comparison, because LeBron, he was born in Cleveland, and he was a lot of people expected him to be on the Cavs forever, and so when the going got tough, he ended up deciding to form a super team. But I think it's more similar to Kevin Durant, where it was Kevin Durant wanted to win, and Joel Embiid, he also wants to win. He wants to win gold this time. Kevin Durant wanted to win rings. So, you just jump from one team to another. And one team that is, really, really close to your country and, to you as a person, and close to so many other people. People were expecting that Joel Embiid was going to get paired up with Rudy Gobert as well as Victor Wembanyama. That is what the French audience believed at first, right? And that was the thought process going into the Olympics for all the fans. And so when he just completely abandoned ship and decides to go play with the United States, it was just seen as him, taking the easy way out. Erica Johnson in the chat totally understands. He jumped teams, and I mean, obviously people get why he jumped teams because, they want an easy way to win the Olympics, and playing for the United States is an easy way to win the Olympics without a doubt. However, I'm not going to say that, the French team is bad. Like, of all the teams that could threaten the United States in their gold medal, the French, they're one of those teams. And if they had, and this is without Joel Embiid even being on the roster for the French. So if they had Joel Embiid on the roster, he might, not only that, he might actually play better on the roster because he would be seen as much more of a scorer on that team as opposed to on the United States playing. But he would also be paired up with Victor, and they would have had a field day in the paint, just getting rebounds and scoring the basketball easily, all of that stuff. And with him not being on the team, not only does it make France's road a little bit difficult, but it also seems it seems just a little bit weak coming in from Joel. And what makes it even worse for Joel Embiid was when there was news that broke out that he actually he actually confirmed it with the French president of basketball that he was going to play for the French team in the next Olympics. This was before he got his, his citizenship and was, able to play for the United States. He was saying, yes, I will play with the French national team. He didn't verbalize it, but he wrote it in text. And there was a previous segment that I did that was, that elaborated everything that he said on text. But he promised, it was an empty promise, but he promised that he was going to play for the team. He was going to play for the French team. And him choosing to, just back out of that is just, it's seen as even weaker, and it's seen as just, there's more dislike behind Joel Embiid's actions now than there would be if, he never confirmed it to the French president of basketball. That is just, no. That's just not it. And there's a lot of just dislike towards him right now, especially with how he's playing on the United States. I can't even lie, he is not playing the best basketball at all for the United States. And Erica Johnson in the chat, do you know the 1992 men's Olympics team was called the Dream Team? Of course I knew that that's what it was called. That's arguably the most popular Olympic basketball team in the history of the Olympic basketball teams. I also know that in 2008 they called that basketball team the Redeem Team, and I know in these Olympics right now the United States is called the Avengers. So they give themselves a lot of, the internet gives themselves a lot of nicknames for these rosters and these lineups, and you have the Dream Team, then there's the Redeem Team, and now the Avengers, because and they all sort of they all have the meaning that of, or a reason why they were called this or why they were called that. So 92, it was the marketing reason, because it's just the first time that NBA players were able to compete in the Olympics. Then in 2008 it was the Redeem Team, because in 2004 I believe it was, the United States ended up losing in the Olympics because their team just wasn't that good, and therefore once they lost the Olympics, it was you got to redeem yourself. So they just made a whole new roster for the Olympics just to try and get the gold. And then they're called the Avengers now because of how I believe it was in the FIBA basketball tournament, they did not play well at all, and they ended up losing the tournament. And so now this is just the the United States way of sending in their A team, which is why they're called the Avengers. And it's just that's just how it was. And Erica Johnson in the chat, the 92 team had good players from back then. Well, every single United States team has good players on the roster. They win gold practically every single year. It's of all the teams that have NBA level talent, the United States has the most by far. And I know there's Noah Lyles, he's going to be champion of what every single time, you bring up any sort of NBA player or any sort of football player or things like that. But in a league like the NBA, like a league that genuinely like just plays all of these, has all of these NBA athletes, like so many overseas players go over to play basketball in the NBA. So they have the right to call themselves world champions because all of the best players from the world are playing in this league. Like, it's not like football where it's like you have just, mainly, primarily American athletes playing. Like, you have people that are raised from so many other countries playing in the NBA in one league. So, especially now where it's like the overseas talent is insane. I mean, the top 3 players in the NBA right now, they're not even from America. Like Jokic, Luka, SGA, they're all from foreign countries. Jamal Murray, also from Canada. There's just like Victor Wembanyama, arguably the best player going to be the best player in the history of basketball. Arguably could be the best player in the history of basketball. He's from France. I said he's from French. Excuse me for that. But yeah, like there's so many other athletes that are from all of these other countries that are coming to play in the NBA. So it's really like, it's a big deal. And the fact that the United States, they always have the most is also a very big deal. So, and one of the biggest reasons why they're able to win the Olympics almost every single time. So, with that out of the way, that's going to be the end of the 4th segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the 5th segment where I talk about the rest of the games that are going to happen today the games that are happening tomorrow, because that's when the next group of games are going to happen in the Olympics. And so I will go ahead and talk about that right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the 5th and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, I'm just going to go ahead and go over the Olympic Games that are going to be happening tomorrow. And, just explaining and not really explaining, but just going over some of the predictions that I have for these games and, the results that I have for these games, as well as, who I think is going to perform, who I think is going to win, and what happens if, which other side ends up winning, right? Like, what happens when, let's say, France ends up winning, or what happens when, let's say, Brazil ends up winning. I'm just going to go ahead and go over that and, just like the possible outcomes and this, that, and all of the things that end up happening. So, for tomorrow, right, because the games, they are happening tomorrow, it's the only group that isn't going to be playing in these games is Group C. So those games the Group C games are going to happen on Wednesday. And so, it's going to be back-to-back days. Like on Tuesday, you're going to see the Group A and B, and then on Wednesday, you're going to see the Group C, and I believe that's the pattern that these guys are going to follow every single time. And, the next game after that is going to be on Friday. Therefore, after Friday, there's going to be the next game on Sunday. And then, not Sunday, but then on Saturday. Then on Saturday and Then on Sunday and Monday, they're going to take a break from basketball and resume playing basketball. So that's really like how the schedule is going to look like going into the future. Now for Tuesday, the teams that are going to be playing in the Group A phase is Spain and Greece. They're going to match up against each other. And then Canada and Australia are going to match up against each other. Now, Spain and Greece, they play at 5 o'clock in the morning, I believe, at Eastern time. I believe. Again, I could be wrong. And then for the next game, Canada and Australia is going to be at 7:30. Now, the reason why I'm like, I have these times is because I think they're using the European type of time where it's you go from 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And then when you get up to 12, 12 in the afternoon, instead of going back to 1, you go to 13, 14, 15, and things like that. So then the next game is Japan going up against France, and they play at 11:15. And then in the final game, that, by the way, Japan and France are in Group B, by the way. Then in the final game, Brazil goes up against Germany, and they play at, according to the website that I'm looking at, they play at 15 o'clock, which I guess would be 3 o'clock for all of you guys that use the American time. And so for Spain and Greece, now Spain, they ended up losing their first game, and I think that tonight is going to be no different. I feel like Greece is going to end up beating the Spaniards because, quite frankly, I don't think there's anyone on Spain that can really guard Giannis. I feel like Giannis is going to have a field day with this Spanish group, and I think, while neither of the teams are rather, good, Spain is arguably a better team than the Greek team is, but I have a feeling that, with Giannis's level of play, I think the Greek team is going to, play just as well as Giannis plays, right? Because unlike the NBA playoffs, where it's the best team is definitely going to win the series, the best team that plays the best in a series, it's different in these kind of games where it's you only play one game, and it's if you play one game and you're bad in that one game, that's it. It's a winner go home type of league. Now, obviously they're in the group phases, so it's not winner go home yet, but every single one of these games counts because you need to increase that point differential. And I don't think this is going to be how should I say this? I don't think this is going to be an easy game. No team is going to come out blowing out the other. I think this is going to be the only close game out of every single game that I mentioned. And really, that's all the opinions that I got. And it's really just dependent on Giannis and how he plays. But I think the Greek team is going to end up coming out on top. Now, if Giannis doesn't play well, then Spain is coming out on top. Because I feel like Spain's team is, a little bit more solid than Greece's team. Next is Canada going up against Australia, and this is going to be one of those really exciting matchups because Canada is, it's loaded with NBA talent, as well as Australia being loaded with NBA talent. And, with both of those players not really both of those players, but with both of those teams having all of these players, then, it's just it's going to be a very, very nice, competition because all of them, they have NBA talent. So I feel like they're all going to be scoring very, very well. And I think this is going to be a pretty good game. But I do think that Canada is going to blow out the Australian team. I fully believe that that's what's going to happen. But that is that's still down for, opinions, but I really feel like that's just the best possible outcome or the most likely outcome that is going to happen. And then just so I can note, and just so you guys can note, if Canada ends up winning, then they'll be 2-0 in the Group A standings, and they'll be the best team. And, same thing that applies for Australia because both of those teams are 1-0 right now. So, depending on which one of them, if it's a close game, then you could probably see the Australian team, well, depending on who wins, like let's say Australia ends up losing, right? They'll be 1-1. Now, whichever team now they just gotta hope that Greece and Spain, they don't win in a blowout. If they end up winning, you just got to hope that they don't win in a blowout. Because if they do win in a blowout, their point differential might end up being better than Australia's, therefore dropping Australia all the way down to number 3 in their standings as opposed to remaining in number 2. Because again, point differential is going to be the tiebreaker. Next is, well, the next game that I feel like I should talk about is Japan and the French. They're going into the Group B stages. Now, of all of the, how should I say this? Of all the teams that are in these kinds of, standings, I feel like Group B is arguably the weakest group in the entire Olympics in terms of the teams that are on it. Like, the only 2 teams that you should really be worried about are Germany and France. Like, I feel like those teams are without a doubt going to come out on top. Like, I don't see any other team in the Group B standings making it out of those standings. I think it's just going to be Germany and France. It's really just going to be dependent on who, goes to the 1 and who goes at the 2 seed, right? So Japan plays France, and I feel like France is just going to absolutely dominate Japan in this game. And this is going to push Japan even further down in their point differential because they're already down. They're already at minus 20 for their point differential. So even if they were to win out the rest of the games, they would have to win out by a lot if they want to make it past the group stages. But again, don't really feel like that's going to happen. Next on the list is Brazil going up against Germany. Again, this is one of those other games where I feel like it's just going to be a blowout. I think Germany is going to end up coming out on top in this game, and there's really just there's no contest. Like the Group A phase, like the Group A and that team, the teams in Group A arguably are I said Group A like 50,000 times. I apologize, but they're arguably the best group and the most balanced group in the entire Olympics, right? Now, Group C is like, I used to think it was Group C that was the worst in the entire Olympics, but after South Sudan ended up winning their first Olympic game, and just the fact that South Sudan was this close to beating the United States, I think the standings are they're definitely not the worst. They might be second best to the Group A standings, but I really think Group C, it's no longer the worst anymore because Puerto Rico is playing pretty well as the Serbian team. They still have Jokic again. Like, while Jokic, you need to play Jokic in order to be a dominant force with the Serbian team. They're still a team that you need to worry about because guarding Jokic is not really that easy. Now, on top of that, South Sudan, it doesn't seem like it's easy to stop South Sudan either. So, just food for thought, right? So those are the games that are going to happen on Tuesday. Those are the results that I think are going to end up happening. And that's really all that I have for you guys on this final segment. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this show. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.